Prison service background, I joined in 1988, having left the army in 1986. I did 13 years in the army and then went into Civvy Street for 2 years, worked for 2 dental labs in Civvy Street, hated every minute of it. And I applied for the prison service, the South Yorkshire Police and the Fire Service all on the same day, because my mate had just done the prison fire police recruitment resettlement course with the army.
What's that?
When you're leaving the army, you do various resettlement courses, and one they used to do was prison fire police.
Oh, okay.
So they recruit people straight from the forces. They don't recruit so many from the forces nowadays, which I think is a bad thing, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. But he'd just done that. He said, if you want to change, try this. So I applied for the South Yorkshire Police because I was living in Doncaster at the time, which is my hometown. The fire brigade and the prison service all on the same day, and the first one to complete the paperwork got me. I would be a copper, a fireman or a screw, and I didn't matter which.
Wow.
Yeah. I actually toyed with the idea of rejoining the army.
Really?
And then thought, no, maybe I should have done. But then again, if I'd have done that, I wouldn't have had the career that I've had. Well, it took me probably the best part of 6 months to get in. Back in those days, it was national recruiting. Nowadays, it's all local recruitment. And so you applied to a central point, and then they recruited from all over the country. So when you finished your training, you could be posted anywhere in the country. Nowadays, with recruitment, they recruit locally. So a jail will put out and say, we need prison officers, apply to this prison. And you apply to go to that prison, or another prison, or another prison. So you get your first choice. I mean, I was living in Doncaster. I put down for Wakefield, Hatfield or Lindome, which are my 3 most local jails, and or anything in the southwest of England, because my wife's from Sherborne. And I got sent to Blunderston, East Anglia. But at least I didn't get a London neck, that's the way I looked at it.
Why not?
Well, London were recruiting heavy. They really were. They had massive recruitment problems in London. And so the fair, I think something like a third of our course actually went to London jails. And once you're down there, you've got to find somewhere to live. You've got to be able to afford to live down there. And the wages are no better than it is for somebody living in Yeovil or Leeds or whatever. You've only got that set wage, and it's not a great wage. Well, I finished my training. I did my initial selection at Wakefield. My initial part of my initial training there. I was on the first ever extra course ever to be held, and that was held at Hull University. We took over the campus during the summer break, and so we trained at Hull University, and I got sent to Blunderston, which was my first big jail after that. It was a Category B jail, Cat B trainer, and I spent, crikey, 8, nearly 9 years there, and that's where I learned jailcraft. That's where I learned how to get a guy out the door without getting a smack in the teeth. Prison service is all about man management. Simple man management. You've got to be able to get the most recalcitrant prisoner out of his cell to do the job that you want him to do in your time span, to your standards as well, and him thank you for being allowed out to do it. It's all about jailcraft. It's a people job, and a lot of people don't realise that it is a people job. But I have spent half my life in jail, quite literally. I'm 66. I spent nearly 33 years in jail. 2/3 of my working career I spent in jail. The other third I spent in the army. Am I institutionalised? Why do I work at a prison? Since I retired. Wakefield, Hull University, and then on to Blunderston, 8 or 9 years at Blunderston. It was a hard jail. It was a very hard jail.
In what way?
A lot of our customers came straight out the Cat A system, and they had what was called dispersal head. In a dispersal jail, you do not talk to the screws. You do not converse with the screws. You do your bird and that's it. The screws do their job, you do your bird and go home. At Blunderston, they had to learn to talk, and they had to learn to actually interact with the prison officers, because their next step is a Cat C jail, which is even more interaction. And then to eventually, hopefully, they get a DCAT, which is an interaction both with the staff and with the public, and then their eventual release. So we were the stepping stone down from the dispersals. So a lot of our guys had come straight out of dispersal. It was mentally challenging, it was physically challenging.
For you as an officer?
As an officer, yeah. Yeah. You're dealing with, in some cases, notorious individuals, in some cases very dangerous individuals as well. They might have well made their way down the system, but they're still just as dangerous as they were on day one. And you've got to learn how to deal with these guys and get them to do the job that you want them to do. Yeah. It really is a people job. I mean, I carried a wooden stave for 20 or plus years, and then I carried the extendable metal batons, and then never drew either in anger in my 33 years. And I only ever drew it once in defence. And that was the only time. And I was on the riot squads for 15 years as well. You use this. I can talk the hind leg off a donkey. And the donkey thanked me for talking it off him. The second you draw that, you've got a ton of paperwork. You have got to have good reason. I was actually sitting in the outer office at Blunderston one day, and it had 2 glass walls, reinforced glass. And I was sitting on the desk there. I was actually talking to the segregation unit at the time. They were talking about coming on to remove a guy off the wing to move him down to the block. For whatever reason, I can't remember what it was. And I'm on the phone to them about this particular guy. And he came down the bottom of the stairs with a big metal chair and promptly started to smash every single window of the office that I'm sitting in on the phone. And I said to the block staff, I said, "Oh, that's him." He said, "What's he doing?" I said, "He's just smashing the windows." It's okay. He says, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in the office with the windows that he's smashing." Right, so we'll be down there in 2 minutes. I said, "Do me a favour, be here in 30 seconds. And he got to the door. And I said, "See that chair?" He went, "Yeah." I said, "Sit on it." And he did. And I went, "Oh." And we sat and chatted. And the block staff arrived literally in seconds. It was just a case of having the coolness just to sit there and say, "Sit on it." And hold. And we just chatted. I said, "What's your problem?" "Oh, I can't do it." Don't want to know what you can't do. What's your problem? Right. No such thing as a problem, actually. There's only a question with an answer waiting to be found. So what is the question you're looking to ask? "Oh, I need to know." What is the question you're looking to ask? "Oh, I'd like to do this." Right, so your question is, how do I do this? And thankfully the block staff got that. Because I had no idea what the answer was. A lot of them just want to be listened to. It's all, as I say, it's all about man management. You do get some staff that when prisoners start screaming and shouting, will jump up and down and start screaming and shouting back. And the louder the prisoner gets, the louder he gets, and the louder the prisoner gets, the louder he gets. Eventually he's going to reach a limit. Mm-hmm. And if that con can go one step more, he's stuck. I go the other way. As he starts shouting, I start talking quieter. And I will get quieter, quieter, quieter. In the end, it shuts up. Because he can't hear a word I'm saying. I did it with our imam, who was in the office. Prisoner came in, screaming and shouting about something, and I just got quieter and quieter and quieter. And in the end, he shut up. So I said, "Right, now you know what I'm going to say. There's no such thing as a problem. Only a question waiting to be answered. What is your question?" "No. What is your question?" And we worked it all out. I said, "Look, there's the forms. If you need a hand to fill them in, come and see me. I'm just talking to the imam at the moment. Come and see me in 10 minutes. Right, if you need a hand, I'll be full forms." And off he went. And Mohammed Awasi, I'm sorry, Imam, he turned around and said, "I have never seen that done before." I said, What? He said, what you did then? I said, well, I didn't do anything. He said, you did. They actually tried to teach that, and that is a textbook example of how it should be done. Having the nerve to go down, and it diffuses the situation, you know, plus the fact he can't hear what I'm saying. If I've gone down, I can then go up. He's already at full pitch. I know where to pitch it now. Plus the fact I've got my hand on the alarm button, and it's just a case of sitting back and chatting. It's all how you deal with individuals. Oh God, yeah, massively.
Why?
Otherwise you never get anything done. I never expected any prisoner to respect me because I wore black and white. I would earn his respect by my word and my deed. And likewise, he would have to earn mine. Respect is a two-way thing and has to be earned by both parties. That's how you do your job. You never promise a prisoner anything you can't deliver. As soon as if someone, oh, can you do this for Mr. G? Yeah, no problem, bro. I'll do it tomorrow for you. And then you don't come in tomorrow. You know full well you're on a rest day.
Yeah.
The next day you do come in, you've lost all that respect that prisoner had for you. If you say if you can't do it, you say so. I don't know the answer to that, but I will try and find out for you. I'm not promising anything. I will try and find out. And if I don't know, I'm sure somebody else does. A typical point in case with that, or case in point, I was in the office at Blunderston and a prisoner came in. We had a brand new senior officer there. He had something like 15 or 16 years in the job. He'd only just transferred to Blunderston. I'd been there 5 or 6 years. And he came in and one of the prisoners says, how do I do this, Gov? And he said, you know something, I've got no idea. I said, hang on, I do. We need that form, this form, that form. We fill these in, we do that, we do that, we do that, and the jobs are done. Oh, cheers, Gov, can you get the forms? I'll tell you what, here you are, there's the forms there. Go away, fill them in. And the SO turned around and says, how the bloody hell did you know that? He says, in 15 years I've never been asked that question. I says, dead easy. I was asked it last week. And that is the only reason I know. You are learning all the time in the prison service. When I was at the Verne, I spent 7 years off the wings. I was in the offender management unit. I was the housing officer, so I was responsible for getting prisoners housing on their release if they had nowhere to go, whether it's a hostel or whatever accommodation, anything like that. I was the OASIS lead. OASIS is the offender assessment system. It's a written record of their time in jail. So I was OASIS lead on that. I then, along with John Denning, set up the offender management unit there. We wrote all the protocols for the offender management unit in there. And then I was offender manager for 2 years. Then I went out and I was NOMIS, National Offender Management Information System trainer, national trainer for just over a year. And then before going back in, I spent 6 months off getting my knee swapped. And so I went back into work with brand new knees. And my knees are 12 years old this year. I did 20 odd years at the Verne.
And you left there only recently, didn't you?
I left there 18 months ago. Well, I finished work there 15 months ago. I've been working here for 18 months. My last day in service was New Year's Eve. My last working day was the 5th of November because I had accumulated leave and toil, time off in lieu. And I actually finished partway through a set of nights. As I started the job as a big brother and then became more of the father figure as time went on. But I always told the lads on my landings and on my wing, the first one of you that calls me Grandad, you'll have it. And they all respected that, right? They all laughed and they all respected it. But that morning, 2 officers came in early at 6 o'clock to do my roll check for me because they knew it was my last ever shift. They did the roll check. That way, if there was any problems on the roll check, they would deal with it. I wouldn't be held back. Right, so I walked towards the gate just after 6 o'clock in the dark, and 3 windows opened up on my wing, and 3 voices went, "See you, Grandad!"
Just the last dig.
They forget I've got friends on the inside. It's all about how you do your job. This is how I did my job for 30 odd years. I talked. Prison officers are regarded as thick thugs. We're not. All right, the adverts say you don't need any education qualifications, but you need to be able to think on your feet, you need to have a sense of humour, right? And you need to be a people person. You've got to deal with all offences, all types of people, all races of people, and so you've got to be adaptable. And you walk into work in the morning, and you may well have an idea of what your day's going to do. And 20 seconds after you get in, forget it. You know, your plans have gone out the window because something else has reared its head the second you've got into work. And so everything you were going to do, forget it. You had a list as long as this arm. You'll walk out that night having completed a list as long as that arm that you didn't know about, and not even touched this one yet. Yeah. So when you walk in the next day, there's your list. You might do that one, but that's what you intend to do. And you have no idea how your day's going to pan out. At times, yeah. One of the first riots I was ever in was actually at Blunderston. And you can smell it, you can taste it, you can feel it. It's in the air. We expected to lose the jail sometime before Christmas. We knew something was fizzing. We couldn't put a finger on it, but prisoners were slightly different. Right? They were reacting differently to us. And then we actually lost it, I think it was the 11th of January. And that was 1990 when Strangeways went up in the April. So Strangeways didn't start the riots, we did. We had ours in January, and it was all over a sticky bun and a bag of sugar. That was the trigger point.
It was over
a sticky bun and a bag of sugar. It was a Thursday night. Thursday night was sticky bun and a bag of sugar night.
What, did someone
They used to get a sticky bun.
Yeah?
Right.
And a bag of
and a little bag of sugar with probably about 2 or 3 ounces of sugar in there. Right? And that was their sugar issue for the week. And there was a disagreement about who had whether the prisoner had a sticky bun or he hadn't. The officer was adamant that he didn't have it. The officer was adamant that he had it. The prisoner was adamant that he hadn't had it, because you tick them up on a millboard as you dish it out, so nobody gets two. And so that was it. They just went back.
But it's a big issue for prisons, though, isn't it?
Oh, crikey,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, I actually finished. I was partially involved in the first incident, and then I finished my shift at about 5:30 and went home, and then got a phone call at 7:20 to say, get your backside back in there, the place has gone on. And I was back in there until 3:30 in the morning, sorting the riot out. Yeah, there's part of squads and gangs of officers going around and sorting bits and pieces out, getting the prisoners back into cells and all the rest of it. And that was the scariest riot I'd been on, because I thought I knew my prisoners, but in that situation they were totally different. And the ones that I would have probably been given a little bit of trust towards, a little bit of latitude, showed that they didn't really deserve it. But the following day, when we were back in, they were back again as normal. And so they were Jekyll and Hyde with the riot. That was the scariest one I did. I've done others at different prisons, but that was the scariest because I knew my prisoners, and they all changed. That was scary. But every time you walk into a new jail, you do that. I always did, because I don't know the prisoners, I don't know the staff, I don't know who I can trust, I don't know who I can't trust. And that's on both sides of the fence. Because not every prison officer can be fully relied upon in a situation. We hired a guy at Blunderston, we used to call him Hatstand. because there'd be an alarm bell on his wing. He'd be stood at the bottom of the stairs, and he'd say, "Give us your hat, it's on the threes. Give us your hat, it's on the threes. Give us your hat, it's on the threes." He used to collect your hats as you went upstairs. "Give us your hat, it's on the threes." And then he used to take everybody's hat and put it in the office. That way you didn't lose your hat on the landing. And we all nicknamed him Hat Stand. That's what he did in a riot. So if you're on the landing with him and it kicks off, what's he going to do? Take my hat off me and put it in the office. We did get people like that. It's difficult to describe. A young officer came in and there was a big kick-off on the ground floor and he literally froze. He froze in the doorway. And the 3 or 4 of us there, we sorted it all out, got the guys wrapped up, got them down the block and everything else. All the other staff had arrived, situation sorted, no problem. I got back on the wing, he came in, he said, "Can I have a word?" I said, "Yeah, what's the problem?" He said, "I need a word in private." I said, "Okay." I went to the other office and said, "What's up?" He said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Why?" He said, "I just froze. I just didn't know what to do." I said, "Do you do this every Saturday night with your mates downtown?" He went, "No." "Do you and your family all argue like this at night and fight like this?" "No." "Did you do this at school or in your last job? Fighting every day?" "No." "Then what have you got to apologise for?" Everybody will find a time when they freeze, right? I'll guarantee you, next time something happens, you don't freeze. And I think it was Blunderstone alarm bells always going off. And I think it was about 48 hours later, we had another kick-off on the wing, alarm bells went, and he tucked in with everybody else. And we got back from the block, and I said, "Can I have a word?" And he went, "Oh God." I said, "See what you did there?" He went, "Yeah." I said, "Told you you can freeze now." It's all that adrenaline rush. And you literally, you get the butterflies in the stomach and the shortness of breath, and you focus right the way down into one tiny little area, and you're watching that little area there. You don't see what's going on over here, you've got your focus on that. Your mates are looking over there, you've got your focus there. And it's all about that. It's all about, I don't know, the nuts to stand up and do it, even though you're absolutely shaking. And you do shake.
Well, technically you're outnumbered, so...
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
30 to 1. Yeah. The Verne C2 could actually house 96 prisoners. There were only ever three prison officers on duty. So that's 33 to 1. And the only reason I'm in charge is because 96 guys upstairs say I am. Just be yourself. Don't try to be anybody else. Don't try to be Mr. Mackay, right? When really you're a Mr. Barraclough. An old dinosaur said to me when I first went and started the job, he said, "Just be yourself, son." So I was 30. No, 32 I was. Be yourself, son. Yeah. He said, "You can be anyone you want for a week. After a fortnight, you're starting to crack. Halfway through the 3rd week, and they've got the measure of you. You have 8 hours a day, 5 days a week on average to work out 72 guys up there. Those 72 have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to work you out. Who's going to win?" Yeah. I've always said to new staff, be yourself. You see the way I do something and you like it, adapt it to your method. You see the way somebody else does something, adapt it to your method. Become yourself. Become the officer that does the job your way. And then in time, people will see the way you do the job and they'll think, "I like the way he does that." And they'll alter their way. I changed because I watched guys and watched the way they did the job. And I thought, yeah, great idea. And then I saw another way of doing it. I thought, that's a better one. And so I adapted the one that I'd already adapted into the other one as well. I'm an accumulation of 100 years because the guys that I got 30 years in had been taught by guys that I got 30 years in, and I've got 30 odd years in, so I'm 100 years of experience. That's the way I look at it, and you just pass it down amongst everybody. Unfortunately, the problem with the prison service now is retention of staff. They're losing the dinosaurs like me. We've come to the end of our useful life. I was 65 when I left. just coming up 65. I had every intention of working that last year. But I woke up one morning and I thought, I've got 4 months at the end of the year. I've done my time. I don't want to go in there anymore. It's not that I'm scared of the job, it's not that I don't want to do the job. I still miss the job. And I miss everybody that I work with. I really do. I miss the challenges. I miss the interaction. I miss the camaraderie. I miss the banter. Officers and prisoners.
Yeah.
They're never your pal, they're never your friend, they're never your bro. This is the prisoners. But you have to get on with them. As a personal officer, especially as a lifer personal officer, I had to know everything about my prisoner. So, as a personal officer, I know if John's wife is just having to move flat because the old one has been repossessed or whatever, if his kids are starting a new school, is little Johnny having trouble at school, is little Joanne getting on well in school. All this goes up to make up my prisoner. And so I've got to know what outside influences are influencing him. Yeah, and I have to know that about all my guys. They can be, but they can also be a place of amusement as well. Just silly things, right? And that can set a whole wing off, right? It's just something stupid happening. That 6 guys came down the stairs at Blunderston, and we had half flats on our stairs going up the landing, and they started fighting on the ground floor. We boiled out. I faced off one of the guys, and he picked up one of the corridor brooms, like 3 broom heads on together. He picked it up. The idea was that he would smash it against the wall, break the head off, and then run me through with the handle of the broom. He hit it against the wall. All that happened was the dust fell off. And all the cons on the landing just wet themselves laughing. It was so funny, and in fact I was laughing so much I almost forgot to grab him on the way by. It's just stupid things like that. But they can be dark in some ways. Death in jail is horrendous. It doesn't just affect the prisoners, it affects us as well. Many years ago, I had a prisoner on my wing. I'd been his personal officer for quite 2 or 3 years. He was quite a good writer. He had a little manual typewriter, and he would write every night. He was writing short stories and things like that. Quite a good little writer. And he always typed until 10 o'clock. Now I'd just started some leave, and I got up in the morning to get a phone call. Before you hear on the radio, John hanged himself last night. He only typed until 9, and then he hanged himself in his cell, and he wasn't found until 8 o'clock the next morning. Right? And the typing he'd done that night was actually a suicide note. And the last paragraph was addressed to me. Mr. G, I'm so sorry you had to find out like this, but I had to make sure that you were on leave and you weren't going to be the officer that found me in the morning. John's death affected me. It still does affect me now. It really does, and this is some 30 years later. Because about 7 or 8 years later, I was driving into the Verne one Saturday morning, and I heard John's name and his co-defendant's name on the radio, and in the Court of Appeal they'd both been cleared of all charges. So that was a total and utter senseless death. I think they were doing 11, and they'd done 5 or 6. They'd got 5, but done about 5 at that point. He just couldn't take it anymore. And so he took his own life. Actually hanged himself on a coat hanger retainer on a shelf 6 inches shorter than his own height. That's how determined he was. And I'd stopped the car halfway over Common Hill, and I sat there for a good 20 minutes. I was actually 10 minutes late for work in the end. debating whether or not I actually did any good in the job. And I said there and then, never again on my watch. And I was actually a suicide assessor for well over 20 years. Not just because of that. I was already an assessor at that point. But I was a suicide assessor for over 20 years. And stupid enough, John's death some 30 years ago still hurts me more than my own parents' death 5 years ago. They died 12 days apart. And John's death still hurts me even more.
Why?
They were in their 80s. He was only in his 30s. And his death was totally senseless. You know, no rhyme or reason to it. But it affects everybody. It affects all the guys on the landing, it affects everybody on the wing, it affects all the officers, especially the poor guy that found him. You know, he'd only been in their job 3 months. I think he was off for a good month after that. It's devastating, it really is. But about a year later, we had the prisoners came down from the landing after unlock one morning, and they said, "We heard John typing on the landing last night." Yeah. No, we heard his typewriter on the landing last night. We heard him typing on the wing. It's one of the night patrols. He got, for 2 or 3 nights, he got a little typewriter, took it up on the landing, put on the radiator, just tapped on the typewriter. Bastard. So we actually borrowed it for a fortnight.
Bloody hell.
Just so he wouldn't be implicated.
Oh God.
Then we made sure that somebody went up every night and typed on the typewriter. You've got to do it.
Yeah.
You know, you really got to do it sometimes. Because otherwise you'll find me rocking and crawling under the table. Right? And if I'm rocking and crawling and crying under the table, you've got no chance. Right?
So
You've really got to find some humour in something somewhere. I was Reggie Kray's life and personal officer for now 3 years, at the same time as Harry Roberts' life and personal officer as well. And Harry Roberts did 48 years in jail, 1966 till 2014, when he was finally released from Lay Hill.
That's a long time.
Yeah, that was a long time. He was a Shepherd's Bush police killer. He shot 3 policemen dead in the street in Shepherd's Bush. But Reggie Kray, everybody asks about Reggie Kray, they all know they've been here. Well, of course, they don't realise they weren't here as civilian prisoners, they were here at Shepton Mallet as military prisoners. Failure to comply with national service rules. And they did 9 months here. But I knew Reg in the early 90s. He'd spent the best part of 30 years in jail at that time. He could be an interesting individual, he could be a pain in the backside as well. He could be incredibly funny, but some days you really had to watch which side he got out of the bed, because he could be a bit tetchy. But he was fit as a butcher's dog. He was lifting more weight in the gym than a lot of the younger lads were. He was still very, very fit then. The photograph I saw of Reg just before he died is just a shadow of the man I knew. Reg was a very, very good boxer. Could have been a world title holder. Yeah. But visits were always fun with Reg. My favourite one of all his visitors was actually Barbara Windsor. Met her twice. Second time she remembered my name. Though I think Reg actually prompted her. But I don't care, I'm hanging on to that. But when she giggled, and that was her laugh, that was her proper laugh. It was like a burst of sunshine in the visits room. And all she was doing was paying back a family debt. The Krays were regarded as sort of Robin Hoods in the East End. They only stole from the rich man. If your family needed help, the Krays would look after you. Your husband's in jail, they'd make sure that someone drove you to the jail so you could visit him on Saturday. That sort of thing. And all she was doing was just repaying a family debt. The Krays gave her a singing break in their nightclubs when she was only about 21 or 22 years of age. And that's the only reason she came to visit Reg. She wasn't infatuated with him or besotted with him or anything like that. She was just coming back to see an old family friend. That's all it was. But she really was so sweet. They're infamous.
They're infamous and
the reason everybody knows about the Krays is because the Krays do that. Who knows about Harry Roberts? Who knows about the Richardsons? Because the Krays did that, they wanted the notoriety, they wanted the infamy. And so they did that. And they kept it up all the way through, right the way to the end. The Krays did not write their own books. Their books were all ghostwritten. I think there's one book that's supposed to have been written by Ron that says that both the Kray twins took out the beam and the hatch in the execution room here at Shepton Mallet. Why did they do that in 1952 on national service, right, when they didn't actually repeal hanging until 1966? That wouldn't have been done. They did not take the beam out. So other people have written the Krays story. There are one or two stories that are very good. There was a recent TV documentary on the Krays that was very good, and there was nothing in there that was a surprise to me at all. Even the revelation that Reg was also gay. I've known that for years. Why did his first wife commit suicide? The marriage was never consummated.
Never.
Never. Right. And her life was made a living hell by Ronnie. Because Ronnie wanted his brother back. But Reg was scared of Ron. Look at the photographs. Look at the way Reg looks at Ron. And you will see deep down the fear in his eyes. The Krays, in the words of their own gang member, were just a pair of murdering bastards. That's all they were. They were nothing special whatsoever. And yet, through cinema and through books, right, they've built this, temple of the Krays. People always say to me, oh, which cell was he in? I always say, pick a cell. Never held on C wing, only held on A wing, pick a cell. Because when they weren't fighting with the officers, and they weren't fighting with the prisoners, and they weren't fighting with each other, they were in punishment conditions. And so A wing was B company, soldiers under sentence for dishonourable discharge. They served all 9 months here. And when they went down to the discipline cells, when they came back, their old cell had been allocated to someone else, so they were put in another cell. So pick a cell. Any cell is a Kray cell on A wing, as far as I'm concerned. And even if I knew exactly which cell they were held in, I would still not tell anybody. Because people will go and it will become a shrine to the Krays. And it's not. They are the wrong people to follow. Totally wrong people. But I'm lucky I met them. Yeah. I met old style gangsters. A lot of the kids now are just plastic gangsters. They have no idea. They really don't. They think they're so big, the Krays will suck them in and spit them out in bubbles. But Ron was the nutter. Ron was a psychopath. If Ron didn't take his medication, that's when Reggie knew trouble was going to hit. Right. The films, they're rubbish. The Tom Hardy film, we played both of them. You got the first film, which was the Kemp brothers. They played them. They always get 6-footers to play them, don't they? 5'7½". That's all they were. 5'7½". Came up to there on me, Reggie Kray. There's one particular photographer, they loved using him because he always took the photograph looking up. And so it gave them that magisterial pose. And they looked a lot taller than they were. 5'7½", came up to there. But it could be fun, it could be a pain in the bum. Yeah, he'd been in jail about 30 years when I met him, and he offered me a top-of-the-range Land Rover, any colour, right, full spec, for £1,000. I did not want to know what the rest of the price included, so I didn't take him up on it. But that was his way of saying thank you. Not that I was ever going to do it.
So you as an officer, he was.
Yeah, he would try to get on my side, right? But I think he respected me. I'm not mentioned in his books or anything, but then I don't think he mentions any screws in his books. Because to be perfectly honest, he forgot a lot of their names. He was in jail for such a long time. Yeah. But it's weird. Yeah, to know that, to realise that I've known people like that. Just the words of his own gang member. Murdering bastard. I'll tell it straight, I won't sugarcoat the Speak to somebody who's been there, all right? Look at why they want to do the job. It's not an easy job, right? You've got to be able to get on with people, but you've also got to be able to compartmentalise your life. You have a world inside the wall and a world outside the wall, and the two should never meet. My wife did not know what I did on the landings for 33 years. I never told her. Completely separate world. She knows I was a prison officer, she knows I was on riot squads, she knows I've come home from work wearing different uniform to what I went to work in. She's never asked why the trousers would just come out of a wrapper, why the shirt has just come out of a wrapper. All she would do would take it and wash it and it'd be ready for the next time. She never asked any questions. Right? Because she knows full well I would not tell her. Because if I did tell her half of the stuff that had actually gone on the wings, like the guy with the metal chair, she wouldn't let me out of the house next morning. Yeah. You've got to be able to separate your two worlds completely. You can't take home what happens to you on the landing. When you walk in, you leave the outside world behind. When you walk out, you leave the inside world behind. There are times when it overlaps. There are times when prison officers will be quiet. They don't want to talk. They really don't want to talk. Just leave them. Right? But speak to somebody. But when you do, if you do take the job up, be yourself. Don't try to be anybody else. And as I said earlier, you see the way somebody does something, you like it, adapt it to your way. Prison is not made up of Mr. Barracloughs and Mr. Mackays. Right? Grouty's no longer there. Fletcher's no longer. Well, the thing is, Grouty, Fletch, Godber, they are all there. They're just in different sizes, nationalities, colours nowadays. They're all there in character. You will find them in the jail. You'll find Mr. Barracloughs in the jail. You'll find Mr. Mackay is in the jail. But they're all a meld of different people now. And just be yourself, right? And adapt the world to your system. And if you need to talk to somebody, talk to them. Don't hold it in. A colleague of mine went off work and we didn't see him for the best part of 3 months. And he had a total mental breakdown. Absolutely. Total breakdown because of what was going on at work. He would not talk to anybody from the prison. Eventually he would talk to only 2 particular officers, as long as they never turned up at his door wearing uniform. And when he came back to work, he got out of his car, started to walk towards the gate, and the closer he got to the grate, the more he shook. And then he turned around and went back to the car, and as he got closer to the car, the shake went off, and then he went drove home again. And it took him months and months to get back. It absolutely destroyed him. When he did come back, we were all very careful with him. Didn't mollycoddle him, right? But we kept a quiet eye on him, and he was okay. He was fine. But it took him a long time to get back to that. Because stress isn't one item. It's lots of small items that go to make one bigger item called stress. And it's lots of little things that finally tipped him over the edge. But he came back. He came back in the end. But just talk. Find out what the job's about. Right? Talk to people that have done the job, and then make your decision from there. That's all I can say. Prisons are the world behind the wall. People will always have a macabre interest in prisons because it's the world they never get to see. They only hear about a prison when the proverbial hits the fan. And specialist riot police officers are going into the prison. They're not. They're prison officers. We were a highly trained specialist team. We sort our riots out. Police can't do it. They don't have the method to do what we do as prison officers. So it's an unknown world, and people want to know about the dark side of life. They want to know the funny sides as well. I tell them funny stories as well as the dark stories. Yeah. I recently had a group of year 5s and I told them how prisoners would actually pop phones up their own bums. To hide them. And I received about 20 fan mail, because when they got back to the school, they were doing their formal letter writing lesson, and they all chose to write to me to thank me for the tour. And 2 of them mentioned, we loved the story about the prisoner put the phone up his bum. When you're doing a tour, you have to gauge your audience, and you've got to watch who's in there. I always tell about the stories about the prisoners with mental health problems, and I'll mark up. And I did notice one young lady one day, her sleeve had ridden up, and there were marks on her arm. So I cut that section completely. You've got to watch your audience, judge your audience, judge what they can take. If you've got the 11-year-old boys, of course they're going to love stories about thumbs up bums.
Yeah, of course they are.
Right? Probably 11-year-old girls will, but maybe 8-year-olds won't. A massive point of education for a lot of people.
Is it needed?
I think so, yeah. I think so. I've had potential prison officers on my tours. I've had in my 18 months of doing this, I've had 3 potential prison officers on my tours, and they've all said thank you. I've got an idea now. I get serving prison officers, I get ex-prison officers, I get ex-cons on my tours. I would love it if we had an ex-prisoner as a tour guide, because his story, he would tell the same story as me, but from another viewpoint. That would be brilliant. We could get an ex-con to do a tour, right? Absolutely brilliant. Love it. And I'd be his best mate. Because the thing is, we would extract the urine out of each other. And people have come and they said, that is so fascinating, thank you so much. We didn't know that sort of thing happened. Yeah. And that to me is brilliant. All I ever looked for in the prison service as a prison officer was one prisoner here to say thank you. And that's all I wanted.
And did they?
Yeah. I got thank yous. I never looked for them, but it's nice when they happen.